Right, we might not need some of this introduction, but for the recording, hey y'all, my name is Ashley Wallace. I'm a customer success manager here at Headset. Been at Headset going on 3.5, almost 4 years now. I started in sales and moved over to customer success because I wanted more time to geek out in the data. And I'm very happy to be running these trainings because it means I get to spend like 2 hours a week just walking through the data with people. I'm not a data analyst, but I have been trained by our VP of analytics and do have background in other careers doing some data analysis as well. For our cross-market analysis at a very high level, really like we're trying to understand what is happening at a macro level. So we can roll markets up together within insights and look at total US, total Canada. We can look at how is the East doing versus the West, where we have markets available to do so. We can see if brands are overperforming in one market versus another. And one of the things I work with the most with folks on in markets is what can I, as a new market, what can I learn from some existing markets? So done work like that with Canadian companies looking within the US to kind of gain some learnings within those data sets. And I've also worked with groups who are like, hey, I'm trying to launch in Michigan, pre-Michigan launch. What data do we use, right? Like where are the state regulations the same? Where can we get a proxy for what we might expect to see? So lots of different things here today. We're going to focus a little bit more towards the pricing aspect. So how does pricing compare and how can we understand some price tiers in particular? Quick reminder, Headset Insights is a cannabis market projection. We are projecting the top line after discount before consumer paid tax, top line retail sales dollars and units. I don't know why I tried to divvy away from my go-to stock definition here. I almost usually read this slide verbatim, but she got funky today. All of our data that we're looking at is currently real time. So if I look in the system today, I can look at data as current as yesterday. The cheat sheet that I am pulling up, we are talking about cross-market comparison. So what markets can we actually even access? At Headset, we have 2 different reads of Headset Insights. We have a category level only read. So when we're in our data, that means that I can get into the top line sales and the category sales. They wouldn't have access to segment, brand, or SKU level information, which I'll have in a full read. So in the US, some of these numbers have changed. Arizona's increased to 27% as of last night. California, where is she? I like my little cheat sheet over here, is holding steady about the same. Colorado is looking really robust. Some of the markets that people ask me about the most are usually like Nevada, which has been holding steady. We've had some fluctuating coverage there. Planet 13 represents a large portion of sales in the overall market there. And so however they're doing tends to dictate our coverage there. Our coverage is also changing in Canada. So we do have access to Ontario, Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan. And then I have one rep who's been prospecting stores in Manitoba as well. So next Canadian province to come online will likely be Manitoba. In terms of like how long will that take, we're still trying to make sure that we have a robust enough retail sample to do so. And so we're at, I think 8% coverage. So we have quite a bit of work to do to get enough good read there. Let's see here. So BC has actually increased to almost 20%, 19.8. Alberta, where is she on my sheet? This fun cheat sheet I'm using, y'all, is not alphabetically sorted. So Alberta's holding steady. Ontario, where are you at, buddy? Ontario is increase. Nope, it's holding steady. 25.18% there. Saskatchewan, where is she? And Saskatchewan about the same as well. It's not a ton of change, a slight increase in BC here. I always like to remind people, especially if you're thinking about cross-market analysis at a macro level, right? Like US versus Canada. In most of our industry reports, which are available for you in app to read or to download, these industry reports almost always will cover a little bit of US and a little bit of Canada. Some of them do go into individual specific markets. And then for those who are interested, we do also offer a blog post. We post it once a month for the prior month, looking at top line sales changes, total basket count changes, sometimes top brands, and that's in our, it's called the Cannabis Market Overview. And again, that's posted once a month at the beginning of the month, recapping the following month in our blog posts. Highly recommend folks check that out. It can save you a ton of time in reporting because our data analysts have done a lot of the work that people report on at a high level across multiple markets in that post for you. All of this is available for you on our Headset website. And that's all the slides we got today, guys. I try to keep it short. Our website is headset.io. And then if you want some industry reports, we do have those available for you in app. I'm in the upper left-hand corner here with the little book or magazine with the little upward arrow. That'll take you into our industry reports. Our most recent report is taking a dive into flower. I found it to be a really interesting read, and I highly recommend folks check that out as well. We do talk quite a bit about flower pricing because that's been one of the hottest topics about flower recently, is like what's happening to flower pricing. All right, get us into insights. I feel like as the bulk of you have been to several of these, so I'm gonna go over all the basics just as using repetition as a tool for memory. So our top category level dashboards, so this section here at the very top of insights, is going to be where you can cross compare markets at a high level. We can certainly do that as we get deeper, and I'll show you how as we get deeper into some of these dashboards. But this is really going to be the meat and potatoes. There are two dashboards specifically for discounting. Again, all of this will be discounting and pricing at the top line category level, so it won't even get down into individual package sizes, but it's a good place to start to get a proxy for pricing trends as a whole, especially thinking about a market like California, right? If we're talking about flower, California is seeing a ton of extra product, and they're also seeing their flower pricing changing very dramatically on a wholesale level. So regardless of the package size, we generally tend to see pricing just kind of slowly going down. Definitely a macro level trend there. Let's do a quick level set. I'm going to do West Coast US. And when I say West Coast, I mean whatever's touching the Pacific Ocean. And then we'll look at a little bit in Canada as well. And so I'm going to use our market size comparison. This is your default dashboard, regardless of your subscription. So if you have a single category subscription in a market, you will have access to all 9 categories within that market within this top section only. Right, I'm going to click our little run button here. I love looking in the last 6 complete months. If you're doing something like a pricing analysis, the last 90 days versus the last 90 days, same time last year might be perfectly fine timeframes for you. And on a lot of cases, when we're doing that year-over-year benchmarking, that data will already be provided for you within a dashboard. Okay, let's see if there's anything super notable about these lovely little markets here. So we're looking at California, Oregon, and Washington, the 3 markets that touch the Pacific Ocean, and what our CS team calls West Coast, because that's where a lot of our customers reside. Flower is king in all of these markets. Pre-rolls do represent a slightly larger share of California's market than we see in others. I think this is due to some of the heavy increases in infused pre-rolls. Again, not a data analyst, but that's what I spend most of my time looking at with people in California, is those infused pre-rolls. And we can also see that vapor pens are a larger portion of their market than Oregon and Washington as well. So 25% versus 18 and 20 respectively. Not surprising, California is our largest market. One thing I'll call out here, though, when we're looking at California versus, say, like a Washington, I mentioned in our little definition that all of our top line numbers here after tax, before tax and after top line retail, top line retail discounts. In California, excise tax is placed in between the distributor and the retailer. And so we actually don't have a way to back that out of the cost of goods. So usually that's included in cost of goods and then marked up on top of it. Whereas in Washington, our little Tiffany blue line here, if I was to go into a store being based in Washington, I will actually pay for all of my excise tax and my sales tax. So in California, this includes that. So the market isn't quite as small. Taxes for me, when I'm looking at what am I paying at the register, are usually representing like 30 to 40% of a purchase. So we'd actually see a little bit higher of a market if we were including excise tax the same way that California does. Getting into something like pricing, let's first start talking about some discounting. So I've mentioned this before on these calls. Discounting isn't as much of a strategy in Canada due to regulations, although I've heard that that is changing. In the US, discounting is a very heavily used strategy for retailers and brands and producers alike. So offering discounts on the wholesale side as well as on the retail side to be able to incentivize people to buy. We can see here that of these markets, Washington is the most discounted West Coast market. However, it is not the most discounted cannabis market anymore. Michigan currently holds that title. Let's do a little switcheroo here just to get a quick level of Canada. So I'm going to take off my US markets and select on my Canadian folks. We've got to put on our fake Canadian / Midwest accent that comes out whenever I talk about Canada. All right, so definitely looking at a very different story when we're talking about the US versus Canada, especially when we're talking about percent share of market. So you can see that all of the Canadian provinces have a pre-roll share a little bit closer to that California 25%. Pre-rolls are going to be our little yellow sections here. Vapor pens are the light blue. So again, fairly high percentage. Saskatchewan, particularly heavy vapor pen market, 23% of sales are coming from vapor pens. When we compare that to some of the larger provinces like Ontario, we do see that vapor pens are a slightly smaller percent of market share. I'd say another thing that I find particularly interesting when I'm cross-comparing markets, we don't usually see edibles ranking in at number 3 when we're talking about edibles in Canada. I think a lot of that's due to some of the regulations. So package sizes are limited to 10 milligrams. I remember when edibles first launched and became legal in Cannabis 2.0, and everyone was asking me like, do I do 4 pieces in a pack or 5? If you're familiar with the edible space in the States, most states allow a 100 milligram max dosage. Texas, of all places, that has some of the strictest regulations around cannabis, actually has no regulation on the max amount of THC that can be contained in an edible, but you cannot smoke a vapor pen or a flower, you will be prosecuted. Very weird state when it comes to regulations. But in Canada, with those packages being smaller and that milligram amount being smaller, they do represent a smaller percent of market share. And when we talk about that in terms of unit sale, we actually see a story more similar to pre-rolls like we see in the US. So pre-rolls usually have a fairly large unit volume share because they usually tend to be single or double smaller packs of pre-rolls. I'll highlight some of those differences that I was talking about as well when we were thinking about discounting. So if you recall, when we were looking in California, Washington, and Oregon, we're talking about discounting ranging from about 11% to 19-20%. We used to see almost no discounting. I remember, like a year ago, Canadian discounts were like 0.5%, 1%. And I've heard from folks that we are starting to see some discounting being available for retailers to leverage. I don't know if that's happening, like if the OCS is allowing y'all to discount to be able to help offer better pricing and be a little bit more competitive, or if you just have to go in with that pricing as is. We have a lot of creative freedom in our pricing when it comes to wholesaling in the US. All right, friends, so I'm going to skip over our market size by category. This will get us a little bit deeper into comparing categories across multiple markets. And let's jump into some pricing and discounting by category. And again, we'll do kind of this like US West Coast versus all of total Canada sales. Part of me kind of wants to see if I can pick a proxy state for each province, but I don't know if I can. I just might toss in Michigan on the US side since it's so close to the border. All right, since we're in Canada, I'm gonna start us here with Canada and then we'll go back over to the US. So this sales and discount graph, I like looking at this, especially in the US market. So when we're talking about the total sales here, this light blue line, that is going to be what people are actually spending on cannabis. When we look at this discount line, this will bring us up to the delta. So like what is total discounts across that the market, or in this case, markets that we've selected. Oh, maybe not markets, this is just Alberta. So I switched dashboards, my filter has cached. So what I might need to do here is go and clear my cache in my browser so that I see accurate markets and filters reflected here, but I can actually go in this particular dashboard, I can only single select an individual market. So I wanna make sure that I know what I'm doing. It's always good to check your filters. You can come in here and select a single or multiple categories, as well as changing your date range. I'm going to look top line total market for now, then I'll probably shift our focus specifically into edibles across these individual markets. All right, so this top line, this is what people have spent in Alberta in the bright blue, and then this is the total discount amount. So if you can imagine this is like, this would be like, if we were to add them together, it would be like total sales if discounting didn't exist. It is not a realistic way to look at sales because it's not actually what people pay. But I do know other data providers that report this like combined total as total sales for the market. Let's see what's happening in Alberta. It looks like total units did peak a little bit in December. Pretty normal to see this little decrease through the beginning of the year, right? Dry January, some people switching over to cannabis, a lot of people just keeping it completely clean and sober. February is a shorter month, and then we tend to start to see sales pick up starting in March and continuing on through the summer. This is pretty much the same in the US or Canada. So as we kind of keep going forward in this, we'll see some of those like seasonal trends maintaining the same. Okay, here, so when we're talking about total discount, again, total discount's not as relevant in Canada because we're not seeing quite as much discounting. This will help us get a scatter plot of how do categories compare to each other versus their discount. So looks like in Canada, tinctures and sublinguals, very small category here, because in Canada, when we're talking about tinctures and sublinguals, we're almost exclusively talking about tinctures. Most products for anybody familiar with the US markets, most products that we call tinctures are actually going to be oil-based products that are sold within Canada. And they do have their own category in Headset. It is called oil, and we can see that one right here. All right, average item price over time. It looks like topicals are seeing quite a bit of fluctuation in pricing. They've gotten a little bit more expensive starting in March and took a little bit of a decrease. Again, a pretty small portion of the market, so sometimes we see more wild fluctuations. This could be the introduction of a couple of new really expensive products into the market, or some actual pricing changes. Price of flower appears to be on the rise. Again, this is across all package sizes, so that could be a change in package size dynamics, maybe a shift towards larger package sizes. We'd have to really get deeper into the data to understand what's impacting that trend, but it's a good place to start and be like, oh, average price of flower in Alberta is actually ticking up. Most places it's ticking down, so it definitely caught my eye. And then let's switch over to a US market real quick.
Ashley, I have a quick question. Is there any way to see the average price per gram over time?
There is, and we'll get to that next. I'm thinking what we'll do, since everybody here is subscribed to the premium markets, is we'll jump from here into the category details and then into the actual pricing section itself. to be able to start to get that. And in pricing overview, Tristan will give you by category, what is the EQ price or price per gram over time. And then the category details will give you a snapshot of price per gram per package size, and then total category EQ price trended over time as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Lots of places to get the information. Also, all the data experts usually have that as well. If you wanted to pivot your own data into a price over time, you can do that. I'm going to switch us in to Washington, and then we'll start to get into some of the premium level dashboards. All right. Let's see what's happening up here in Headset's home state. All right, lots of discounting. That I already knew that. This doesn't surprise me. But we can see that delta in discounting, like that just whole bar just increases pretty dramatically. As I'm switching across between the US and Canada, I would also like to call out that if I'm looking in Canada, I'm talking about Canadian dollars. If I'm looking in US data, I am looking in USDA. So if you are trying to do any sort of cross-country pricing analysis, please make sure that you're doing the appropriate conversions for the foreign currency.
Ashley, for something like this comparison, is this an added thing as far as what we're paying for and everything? Because I don't see the pricing and discounting category.
So you should have this dashboard. It should just be in your subscription, Mike. It should just be limited to Washington. Are you in these category level dashboards up here? It should be the third dashboard down.
Yeah, no, I'm a dumbass. Just ignore me.
Like usually that one's like user error. I'm still getting used to these category level dashboards, y'all. They're our newest dashboards. We essentially expanded our Insights Pulse read to give you a deeper analysis and help for better cross-market analysis. We will not be going into pricing and discounting by market yet. This pricing and discounting by category allows you to deep dive into one market in one or multiple categories. The pricing and discounting by market is helpful for cross-comparing markets. So I think, Tristan, for you, if you're thinking about like, what is total average item price in Alberta versus Saskatchewan, that next dashboard down is the place that you'll want to go here. Or building, you know, a friendly neighborhood pivot table. So some of those trends that I mentioned that we see over time that are pretty consistent across the US and Canada is going to be some of that seasonality trend that we're seeing here. So we can see, again, total units spike slightly in December compared to the prior month. We see that slow, steady decline through dry January in our tiniest month of February. And then we see that uptick back up through March and April. Pricing usually remaining fairly static. I imagine if I hover over April, it's going to be a little bit more heavily discounted than some prior months. 420, it's just that big discount time. Interesting. So in Washington, our edibles are kind of in the middle of the road almost. They're not the least discounted at all. That goes to, sorry, discount percentage 19.5%. Let me reorient myself to my graph real quick. Sorry, they're not the cheapest products at all. So pre-rolls are going to be our least expensive products. So as we're going up here, these are more expensive products. And as we're going over towards the right, they're going to be more heavily discounted. So in Washington, our flower and our concentrates and our beverages are our most discounted products, whereas our edibles are kind of like in the middle of the road in terms of pricing, but least discounted compared to some of these other categories. Pricing in Washington, definitely a little bit different of a story than what we see over in Canada. We see tinctures and sublinguals pricing is actually slowly increasing. I think that's interesting. I might need to explore that offline. Let's see what's going on in edibles. So edibles are seeing a slight, since the beginning of the period, they've actually seen a slight increase in pricing, potentially due to new entrants in the market, also a little bit less heavily discounted than some of those other categories, so maybe having less pricing fluctuation based on discounting. We can see here edibles, the least discounted product category within Washington. But I'm thinking about like, how do I get into this a little bit deeper? There are a lot of places that we can go. So depending on your subscription, so Mike, for you, you only have one market. So we're really just going to be walking through this as the lens of like, how do I do a pricing analysis? Tristan and Spencer, for y'all, you do have multiple markets on here. So there are many dashboards that allow for multi-market selection. So you have all of these category level dashboards, but also when we start getting into things like category details, which is usually where I'd go first if I was going to start a pricing analysis, I might start on the pricing overview. I think I'm just a creature of habit and I keep going to these category details, even though the pricing overview answers all the questions that I have. And in the category details, I could deep dive into, let's say, one category, maybe edibles in Washington, and get a peek for what is the total % market share? How does that break down in terms of segments? So are gummies more popular than chocolates? If I was to do something like a multi-market selection here, it's not something I do as often in the US as I do in Canada. But we can actually come into this particular dashboard and you can deep dive into a single province or all of the provinces or just a few provinces of your choosing. So let's keep my fun last 6 complete months. We're only 17 days through May. You might want to expand that out and to include half of May. I just don't like looking at the drop-offs. And like I said, I am going to deep dive us into edibles specifically. That is correct. All of our reports are going to be are based from retail point of sale data. So this is all going to be what is sold at retail. We do have some, depending on how you define wholesale, we do have some costs that are told to us from the retailer point of sale. So we do have some like, what did the retailer pay for this product available in here, and you'll find that most in the pricing section. And where you'll want to look is for anywhere it says the word cost. So cost is what the retailer paid for it based on their what's entered into their point of sale. Price is what did the end user buy that product for. Again, after discounts, before taxes. Okay, so this is a pretty familiar story probably to everybody on the call. Gummies are king in the edible space, and that holds true within Canada. Looks like category sales are slightly on the rise. So we can see here, we start seeing a good uptick starting in March, and then a slight increase in February as well, or April as well. Category market share remaining fairly steady. We've seen a little bit of a decrease and increase through March of less than 1%, actually 0.1%. And Tristan, I actually have to correct myself. When we are talking about our flower, pre-rolls, vapor pens, and concentrates are inhalable categories, we are equivalizing our pricing by gram. When we are talking about in Headset Insights, when we are talking about our non-inhalable categories, so our edibles, our topicals, tinctures, sublinguals, oil, I had to have missed a few, beverage is included in there as well. We are equivalizing by milligram of THC. So you'll notice here when we're talking about total sales by package size, instead of saying like 1 gram, 3.5 grams, or pack count or ounces, or however actually physically heavy the pack is, we're going to be looking at the dosage for that pack. That's my cheat sheet. Whatever is, whenever you see EQ cost, if you're on this page, just go look at the total sales by package size right below it and be like, oh, okay, this is in milligrams of THC. That means we're equivalizing by milligrams of THC. If you were to flip into something like flour, you'll see in this little cheat sheet here that you'll see traditional flour package sizes like 3.5 grams, 7 grams, 14 grams, etc. Then I know I'm actually equivalizing by gram. So this is giving me total cost rolled up for all of these markets. If you did want to see if the markets were different from each other, there are different places that we can go. So you have a couple of options. You could come in here and you could simply change what you're running this for. So average cost across the total market. I'm going to write this down, 6.67. So it does look like prices, average item price for Alberta is a little bit less expensive when we're talking about these 10 milligram packages. So total combined markets was closer to 664. Now we're looking at a 625. So this is just one easy way in app to start to pull that. There are also tables that we can get into as well, where you could pull some data out and do some cross-market analysis with some of your own exercises. It looks like BC is a little bit more expensive. So coming in, gosh, what, 14 cents above what we were seeing for the total combined group. I personally think that sometimes if you're doing an analysis and you just need those numbers quick, that running through this dashboard and waiting for that load time can take a little bit less time than exporting and pivoting an entire data set. Really up to you for what works best for you. All right, friends, not going to go through everything on this dashboard, but just as a quick reminder, you can get into a little bit of product landscape. We'll see these quite a bit in the pricing dashboards themselves. This is really meant to help you do some white space analysis. So maybe in Ontario, there's room for a 5 milligram ratioed cookie. I don't know. What I might want to do here, if I was thinking about using this as white space analysis, is come back in my date range and look in the past. So again, reloading this or opening it in a new tab to look at 2 separate date ranges and see, like, was this filled at one point and there was just no demand for it, and so it fizzled out and everyone went back to the 10 milligram packages. If I was a producer processor in Canada, I would probably put almost all of my eggs into this 10 milligram basket in terms of THC. And then if I'm doing ratioed products, I'd still try to keep my THC at that 10 milligram minimum. I just might look at, like, if I want a CBD heavy product, maybe dosing it with like 2 to 5 milligrams per piece, or even 1 milligram per piece. Very different edible space, Mike. If you've ever played around in it, it looks really different just because of that 10 milligram max dose. Wana is a US company that's performing pretty well. I do know from some recent publications that y'all should start to see Kiva come into the market. So Mike, I imagine you're pretty familiar with Kiva from California. They are a large edible brand that has been moving quickly across the US and is now entering into the Canadian space as well. I haven't started to see a ton of sales for them. We can see Wild coming in here, another US brand across several of the same states as Kiva, but we should start to see Kiva starting to peak in here fairly quickly. So keep an eye out, everybody. We'll kind of watch. There's another person that's coming into the space, but I can't say who it is. Just there's quite a few US edible brands taking a peek at how do we get into Canada right now. And Tristan, Spencer, on your side, if y'all are ever looking for like US brands to help manufacture a process and white label for in Canada, let me know, because I know people who are looking for partners. I'm trying to think. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up there, guys. I'm just thinking about where to go next. So a lot of times when I'm talking about pricing, I'm not necessarily talking about cross-comparing market pricing. However, we can see that in Canada, even though we see consistent brands, that average item pricing does fluctuate slightly across the different provinces, which leads me to believe that I might need slightly different pricing structures depending on which province I'm trying to sell into. Mike, I'm sure your team's dealt with that when we're talking about which US market to go to. How do you price your products to make sense for the particular US market that you're going into versus some of the ones you've launched in prior? What I might do if I'm thinking about that is, instead of going into the pricing overview, which is going to give me a high level overview, I might really want to start jumping into some of these deeper dashboards, but I am going to start us here mostly so that you guys have an orientation of what's available for you on this page. So our pricing overview dashboard does have a help article associated with it. So if you did have any particular questions about like maybe a tile I didn't cover, please click on this little question mark. It'll take you into the help article associated with that particular dashboard. Close my side navigation menu here. I'm going to stick in Ontario since it has some of the largest provincial sales. This is a place where you can come in and combine markets though. So again, just like our category dashboards, you could come in and look at a single market, or you can come in and rotate through the markets or combine them all together. That's really where the power of the filters can come in and help you make leverage insights to be able to make multiple analyses using the same dashboard. All right, so let's stick with our friends in Ontario and then switch over to Washington. All right, she loaded. All right, so this is where I was telling you that in most cases when we're talking about pricing, it will be benchmarked for you. So in the pricing overview, it sounds like someone might be moving into my building. In the pricing overview, we can see our time frame on the left-hand side is going to be the most current 90 days, last 90 days. And on the right-hand side, we're going to have the same time frame from the prior year. So looking at 2022 here and 2021 on this side. This just helps us benchmark that pricing and see how has that changed year over year. So you see that edibles in Ontario have actually gotten slightly more expensive. I bet anybody in the US is like, why? Everything here is getting cheaper right now. And we can see that the EQ price has actually decreased. So package is more expensive, but the price per milligram of THC has declined for consumers. Cost to the retailer has increased. And boy, has unit volume increased pretty dramatically. So we are looking at our price per milligram of THC in this bright blue line here, remaining fairly static-ish, but on a slight decline in the middle of last year. This is when the market was seeing a little bit of a slowdown. I don't know if there was anything in Ontario in particular, but kind of the whole cannabis market is COVID regulations changed, saw a little bit of a slowdown here. We can see that the actual item price actually slightly increased during that time, which tells me that this could be due to some ratioed products. All right, we can see the introduction of some more expensive 5 milligram packs, again, likely looking at, would imagine some more ratioed products. Our smallest THC packages, that price per milligram of THC has continued to decline. Again, looking at those most popular packages, really seeing a fairly steady, maybe a slight decline, but a fairly steady price point here. I always recommend that folks take a peek at the average item price in this particular visualization. This will be repeated for you on your pricing details. And one of the ways that you can leverage that is, let's say we wanted to look at some specific brands or maybe our own brands in Ontario. When we get into the pricing details, we'll have a plethora of additional filters available for us here. And this visualization will be repeated. So when I'm looking at this based on my current filtered selection, so just looking at edibles in Ontario, I can start to get a good feel for what is the category and segment average margin. And then when I get into the pricing details, I'll be able to again see this based on my more custom filtered selection. So I could even get into like, how do my brands in particular compare at a pricing level versus the average? Looks like retailers might be incentivized to carry mints. They're certainly making the best margin on it. Our most popular group here, product category gummies, driving a 34% margin on average for our retail partners. Again, some more pricing landscape. So I think that this has been one of the more fun things to watch. Mike and I have been over here in US markets that have had these categories for ages. But in Canada, what we actually have seen is as Cannabis 2.0 in the market has matured, we have seen additional segments pop up. So I remember August of like, gosh, not last August, but the prior August, I had someone like just hounding me for information in Canada about save-free edibles, and there just weren't products being sold in the market. And we can see that groups have come in and started to sell additional segments. So we have savory edibles, other, which can include things like popsicles and frozen edibles do go into the other group here. So we're seeing some of those pop in. We did have mints this time last year, but we did not have ingredients. So I think cooking oil, flour, sugar, things like that. What else is new? The traditional like traditional blondie brownie caramel bars, as well as candies, lozenges, gums, and a couple of others. So definitely seeing more diversity within the Canadian edible market than we were last year in terms of just sheer product categories. Gummies are still king. They're still driving the bulk of sales and unit volume. They represent 58.2% of the total category sales in that 10 milligram package size. This same time last year, that was actually a little bit lower. So year over year, seeing an increase in market share. I don't want to take us too far into this, guys, because I am going to actually dive into this in our follow-up session, which I think is on Thursday. So on Thursday, essentially what we'll do is we'll go deeper into the pricing details and the pricing bands. What I probably would have time for, so what I'm looking at here is taking in some of these, we can take these pre-built pricing bands. So in headset data on the pricing overview, you're going to be looking at headsets defined pricing buckets, which are very general because they have to function across all the categories. So you start at buckets of $5 and then they jump up to $10 buckets once you start getting above $30. We can actually build these into our own custom pricing buckets using the pricing bands dashboard and look at good, better, best pricing. Tristan and Spencer, for you, depending on what you're trying to do with the data, you do have access to most of the information in these data tables available for you. We drop them into what is known as Headset Vault. It's a Snowflake instance, and I think that you can pull these tables, the data from these tables in your own Power BI. However, you are also completely welcome to come in here and either use the system to do your pricing analysis or download the raw data. So every dashboard within the pricing section will have a downloadable data table. Let's say we were really focusing more on that cross-market analysis. If I was to rerun this with multiple markets on it, because we have a market column here, you can actually just pull all of the data. It'll take a bit to load and then dump that into your Excel workbook as well. Again, with this particular page, though, you are going to be stuck with Headset's predefined pricing buckets, which sometimes aren't as relevant depending on the category. I think the most obvious is in Oregon. Oregon, everything's so cheap that like I had to ask for this less than $5 bucket. And in one of the dashboards, we had to get down to $1 because you can buy a pre-roll in Oregon for $1 US. I was shocked. I did not realize I could just be driving to the border to get cannabis. So if you are taking a trip down from Vancouver or the west coast of Canada, please come down to Oregon and buy cheap weed. Here you go. So you can see all the different provinces are on here. You're able to export these tables by hovering over the upper right-hand corner and going into the tile actions, clicking on download data. If you are looking at a big export like this, I do recommend coming down and selecting all results. So go into advanced option, number of rows to include all results. This will help you ensure that you have a complete download. And you can just click download there and pull it as an Excel, or if you're trying to do something in Power BI, maybe pulling a CSV might be better for you. All right, guys, that's my weird cross-market comparison, starting to teaser into pricing analysis training. Does anyone have any questions? We do have 7 minutes left on the clock, so I'm happy to like walk through something specific for this group here. I'm going to take silence as a no, that we're all good.